Hey everyone, I am super excited to be having a look at the recently announced Marvel Legends exclusive Deluxe Iron Man action figure, and he comes with an amazing proton cannon. Before we get into this review, I just want to say please like, comment, share, subscribe, or even hit that super thanks button. I appreciate all engagement. Now, since this is a special edition figure, the shipper box is amazing looking. It's really inspired by the 90s Iron Man animated series retro action figures. The whole box comes in that retro looking pink color with very vibrant blue stripes in the background. It's amazing how cool the shipping box looks. It's even decorated with that retro looking Iron Man logo, as well as the artwork from that 5-inch Toy Biz action figure line. That branding is consistent all the way around the whole box. And looking at what it looks like from the side, it also says there Iron Man with his proton cannon, and this is what the top of the box looks. And then we come down to the bottom, and once again we move on to the back of the box. Here's Iron Man's description, and we also see a schematic over here for his alternate hits and hands, effect parts, and of course the proton cannon on that plastic stand. And finally on the bottom we have product information. So now let's open this box to get the carded figure out. Once we open the box, we have the proton cannon in its old box at the top. Even the proton cannon box is really cool, consistent with all that retro branding. We see a render of the cannon on the front of the box, same thing on top, and below some product information with that Iron Man comic panel. Down to the sides, also the same Iron Man branding and artwork. On the back, the schematics, and finally onto the last side is the same Iron Man branding. So now let's go ahead and get the main action figure out of the box. And this is what the carded retro action figure looks like on card. Once again, really amazing looking, brings back so much nostalgia. It really makes for a great display piece on card. But of course, I'm gonna have to open this. On the plastic bubble, we see the figure together with two effect parts over here, an alternate helmeted hit, a new Tony Stark hit with his mullet, and of course, some interchangeable hands. Once we go to the back of the card, once again, Iron Man's description over here, and some schematics for his alternate hits, hands, and effect parts, and finally product information at the bottom. But of course, first things first, let's get to opening the proton cannon. The plastic stand is held in place by a cardboard insert, and the rest of the proton cannon is in its big paper baggie. And finally, the effect part is held in place by another cardboard insert. Now let's free up that effect part, and it is packed quite nicely. We can see that the effect part is packed quite nicely and there's no warping, so the effect part is pretty straight out of the box. And now we unwrap the proton cannon. The proton cannon is mostly cast in a light gray plastic, and there's plenty of good sculpting tech detail all over this cannon piece. Starting from the bottom, we have the handle over here. There's some texturing for the grip, and there's also this cylinder where it's topped off with red paint on the front. There's also a couple more of these cylinders. They look like support blasters, and they've got hits of red paint on the front. The main cannon piece has got multiple blasters, and I like the pink paint behind those blasters, really bringing out the color and making it look interesting among all the rest of the gray detail. There are also hits of darker gray paint to bring out some of the recessed panels on the proton cannon. All the paints are really sharp and nicely applied. You can even see finer details like a small panel over here with tiny red buttons, and also on the insides of the cannon there are a couple of pipes and button detail over here. On the top of the cannon there's more of those tech detail, like these stripes that run down the front of the barrel of the cannon. And once again we also see some more pipes on the outside of the cannon. I like these 3 red stripes over here on the outside of the cannon, making it look really cool as well. And the red stripes pop against the rest of the cannon. So there's a lot of sculpted detail on this cannon, even down to the back where it looks like a maintenance access panel. So without a doubt, this accessory is the star of this set. The proton cannon plugs into this plastic support with this hole on the bottom of the cannon. since the hole is set further forward of the cannon, you want to make sure that the larger part of the plastic base is behind that peg hole so that it can support the weight. So this way the support can hold up the weight of the cannon and it looks perfect, being held horizontally in place like how it floats in the Marvel Superheroes game. And finally, with that port on the front, you can plug in that effect part. But you just want to note that this effect part is larger than the other Iron Man effect parts and only plugs into that middle. Now to unbox Iron Man, I simply slice the plastic bubble off the card back. And now you can see that there's also a second tray behind the main one that holds one of the other effects parts. His first effect part is cast in a translucent blue plastic and it's flexible, so very child safe, even with these quite sharply sculpted parts. It also catches the light quite well, and there's white paint on the middle to give it the glowing effect. On the reverse side of this effect, there's a triangular protrusion over here, and that's where you plug the effect part into the center of his chest. That effect part plugs in quite well because there is a recessed portion over here, and that's the retooled part of his torso when you compare it with the original modular armor Iron Man. And you can see that he doesn't have that same recess, so this effect part is not reusable on this red and gold Iron Man. His next effect part is also cast in a translucent blue plastic and it also catches the light well. This time, this effect is given in a white paint all over the core of it. So once again, it's also got that glowing effect. And this is also cast in soft plastic, so it is very child safe. There's a hole on the bottom of this effect, and it's molded to fit his right fist. The effect part is quite a snug fit to his right fist, and it goes all the way in. And this is how you can display him powering up and releasing all that stored energy from his fist. Even though the effect part is molded specifically for his right fist, you can still kind of fudge it by sticking his left fist into it, and it only goes in halfway, but it doesn't look half bad, and you can fudge it as well. And since most Iron Man fists are the same shape, it's definitely possible to reuse this effect on so many other Iron Man figures. So there's really no denying the playability of this effect part. I will however have to say that this effect part does not fit on other Iron Man like the more recent Alex Ross one. For his first alternate helmet, it is cast in a glossy bright red plastic. There's a yellow faceplate attached with bright blue paint for his eyes. I've got a little bit of scuffing on mine. This alternate head is exactly the same sculpt that came with the original red and gold modular armor Iron Man. And this is probably inspired by his look from the Marvel Superheroes and the Marvel vs. Capcom game. So it's got the same features like the panel on the sides for his ears, as well as a bit of panel line work detail on the top of the helmet. And his next alternate head is also the highlight of this set for me. This is an unhelmeted Tony Stark head with his trademark mullet from the animated series show. This head sculpt is really cool. He's got a neutral expression on his face, coupled with a digital dot matrix printing technique. He's got sharp paint applications for the black for his eyebrows, the blues and the whites of his eyes, as well as a skinny mustache in black. And there's also a light red or orange for his lips. His hair is a separate piece of black plastic, sculpted with a lock of hair down the middle of his forehead, and it parts on the left side of his head. You can see the sculpted waves in his hair, and it goes all the way down to the mullet on the back. So I really like all that sculpting work for his hair. It just really screams iconic 90s Iron Man. And over here I'm just putting a couple of unhelmeted Tony Stark heads together. So the new one definitely stands on its own as one of his more iconic 90s looks. But I also have to say that I like the blue wash on the 20 years Iron Man. That blue wash definitely helps to bring out more of that good sculpting work and texture on the hair sculpt. And now I'm doing a couple of head swaps over here, and you can see that it actually fits perfectly between these two Iron Man. However, this head does look a little bit small on this body, while the Tony Stark mullet looks a bit big for this armor. The 80 years Tony Stark head sculpt might sit a little high on this body, but I think that the mullet Tony Stark head sits just fine on the 80 years Iron Man. And naturally, Charles Bronson Tony Stark also sits well on the new body, with the mullet Tony Stark sitting nicely on the 20 years Iron Man body as well. All his alternate hands are also cast in the same bright red plastic, and this time he's got a nice hit of yellow paint for the repulsor ports on the insides of his palms. The repulsor hands are articulated inwards and outwards, while his gripping hands for holding on to the proton cannon are articulated upwards as well as downwards. The repulsor blast hands of course fit onto the figure just fine. However, the one and only blast effect that comes with this set has a larger port on it, so it doesn't fit onto his hands. It's only meant for the plasma cannon. But no biggie, because if you have other Iron Man figures in your collection, they would all come with their own repulsor blast effects, and they're all compatible with this new Iron Man as well. And lastly, putting his gripping hands onto this figure. And this is the awesome shot that I've been waiting for to pose Iron Man with his plasma cannon, or proton cannon as I like to call it. I think this looks amazing and really brings back all those memories from my childhood. I will say though that this one blast effect looks kind of measly when you think about how the proton cannon usually is activated and blasts with a thick beam of energy. So this one small effect looks a little awkward. But if, like me, you have other Iron Man action figures, you can always combine other blast effects from them. There are enough Iron Man releases prior to this that have light blue blast effects. So I guess this makes the proton cannon or plasma cannon look a little better with those blast effects. And now onto the sculpt of the figure itself. He's mostly reused from the Mark XIII over here, except that he's got a new head sculpt for that helmet, and of course new tooling for his upper torso in order to fit that effect part. Instead of the metallic red and gold, over here of course we have the glossy bright red and bright yellow plastics in use. In my mind's eye, I've always thought of Iron Man as a metallic red and gold. However, this bright red and bright yellow really pops, and it's a great throwback to that 90s animated series look. Being on the same body, he's also got the same faults, in that the red shoulder pad armor looks like it's got a small gap from the rest of his torso. So over here you see gold in that gap, and this gap is once more emphasized by that bright yellow that really breaks up the reds from his chest armor to his shoulder armor. Speaking of his animated series look, this helmet is amazing as well. It's made from the glossy bright red plastic for most of his helmet, and it's topped off with a bright yellow faceplate. The eyes as well as the mouthpiece is red from the parts of the helmet that are inserts into the mouth and eyes, while the top has got sharp yellow paintwork for the line work and panels on top of his helmet. For the rest of the helmet, he's got a strip of panels that go all the way around the back, so there's a nice bit of detail on the rest of the helmet. Most of the rest of his body is assembled from red and yellow plastic parts, and that means really clean lines. I like how all the parts in different colors just look really neat and simple, but that adds to the sleekness of this armor. There's a hit of yellow for the center of his belt, while again going down his arms, there's a yellow panel that's attached to the outside of his forearms, and we see the same down the sides of his legs. The last bit of paint is the yellows for those ripped knee pads on the front of his kneecaps. Most of the sculpt is really simple, and what adds a bit of detail is all these sculpted lines in his armor that you can see on his calves, his thighs, the back of his waist, and on his forearms. So once again, it's a really clean, simple, and sleek look for an animated series Iron Man. For articulation, he's got a ball hinge at the top of his neck and another ball joint at the bottom of his neck. So you can spin his head 360, the two ball joints combine to give you a good bit of sideward tilt. He can look down that much, as well as look up quite a bit. That's facilitated by that hinge in his neck, so that's really good for flight poses. Swivel hinge at the shoulders that go 360 and they feel detented, and that hinge also lets you go out quite a good bit beyond 90 degrees. He's got an upper bicep swivel for 360 spinning action, double jointed pinless elbows for good range, little bit of interference from the thickness of his gauntlet. He's got a swivel hinge at the wrist that goes 360, articulating in and out. And I'd also like to point out one thing, which is that the repulsors on the inside of those fists are not painted like the ones on the gripping and the repulsor blast hands. Mid-torso ab crunch for good forward range as well as backward bend, swivel for 360 spin, ball jointed hips that go out quite a good bit for a guy in armor, no problems forward and backward as well, thigh swivel that goes 360, pinless double jointed knees for good range, more than 90 degrees. Oh well, this guy's calf swivel by that boot armor so you don't see the swivel at all, great work. hinge at the ankles for good upwards tilt and downwards tilt. And finally ankle pivot that goes outwards as well as inwards, and it feels a little detented as well. So even without the proton cannon, the effect parts, and his great scheme of articulation, plus that really great animation accurate head sculpt, makes this figure really stand out by itself. And once you combine this figure with other effect parts from other Iron Man figures, all that playability and posability really makes this one feel like Marvel Legends release of the year. Iron Man stands at 6.5 inches, and that's about 16.5 centimeters. While the proton cannon is about 6.25 inches long, and that's about 16 centimeters. And it's about 2.25 inches in diameter at the thickest part, and that's about 5.5 centimeters. For size comparisons, here he is with a couple of other armors. Here he is with Thor and Cap. Here he is with Hulk, Wolverine, and Spider-Man. And here are a couple of his buddies from the animated series, with the Silver Centurion armor thrown in at the back just for good measure. Now I really feel like we should have a Marvel Legends version of Century, as well as that particular 90s version of Scarlet Witch. And here he is with a bunch of goons from the animated series. And I think that we're definitely due action figures of the Mandarin and Whiplash. And finally, here he is with Doctor Doom, Thanos, and Ultron. For comparisons with other lines, here he is with G.I. Joe Classified Series and Star Wars Black Series. This deluxe pack exclusive Iron Man is breathtaking. The star of the set is the plasma cannon with accurate detailing and paint. The figure itself is no slouch, executing the animated and video game looks almost perfectly, and is complemented with unique power effects that push this figure's playability to another level. The retro packaging looks amazing, but trust me, this one feels even better playing around in hand. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, subscribe to my channel, and even hit that super thanks button. Thanks for watching, take care, and stay safe.